Okay, so here's where you begin with the tying method. I'm going to take my cord, and I did pull out some of the inner core like Steven suggests, and then so there's maybe, for me, there's just a tiny bit extra on the end that's just the outer sheathing material, and then melting the end. That definitely helps. And on my actual Vibram ones, the classic ones, I had these punched at a cobbler, and in order to stick them through, what I found helped a lot is I would kind of shove them through and then take a tweezers and pull them through on the other end. And this will keep getting frayed, and you'll have to keep melting it and everything, but it's pretty easy to do it that way. So what you're going to do is take either your template, if you're going to experiment, or your real Vibram or the Connects version with the holes punched. And this is going to be the left foot, like this. And so then I'm going to start on this outer hole right here. So you go from the top through to the bottom. And then I found you pull it through so that you have a tail from here to here that's about 14 to 15 inches. It seems to be plenty. So then from there, you're going to make some spirals, I guess you could call them. And this is from Sonia's method. And I found it doesn't matter so much if you go from the front and spiral around to the back, or from the back and spiral around to the front. I'm going to go from the front to the back. So I can't pull super hard on this cardboard because I pull the holes out. That's why there's duct tape there. However, on the rubber, you're going to want to pull these knots really tight so that there really isn't a lot of play in them. So I'm going to wrap it around once. There's one. Here's two. And I'm counting by the number of loops that I'm seeing. Here's three. And I went 4 because I lock this side off. So I'm going to try to get this closer so that you can see it. So here's the 4 spirals. And then what I do is I lock only the last loop off. And what I do is I take the tail, here's that top loop, and I go underneath and through. My loop sort of disappeared, but then when you pull it tight, you'll see it again. Okay, so it should look like this. And you should be able to visually count 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 spirals or loops or whatever you want to call them. And then I sort of slide them down, and it really makes sure you're not going to have a lot of play right there. So then it looks really clean, just like that. If you end up adjusting your sandals, you know, you're going to be adjusting them probably somewhere in here, so you would have to undo the spirals. But this lock helps this not to move. Okay, so then what you do is take the end, and you're going to go through this other one, from the top to the bottom. And then you put your foot in to kind of gauge how tight this is going to be, where this is going to be at, because you're going to be doing spirals on this side too. So I found that I do it pretty tight, but not super tight, so it's hard to tell. But on my Connects pair, they're snug. I can't necessarily stick a finger in there, so it's just personal preference how tight this is going to be. So get a pretty good idea, and then you're going to, on the Vibram, it's not going to matter, it's going to stay in place, but on this cardboard one, I'm going to hold it so it doesn't slide. And I'm going to do the same thing with the spirals, only there's one difference on this side. So from here, I'm just going to go from the back to the front on this side. Again, it doesn't really matter if you go forward or back. Okay, so there's one, there's 2, and there's 3 once I get it around. So on this side I just experimented as well, and I didn't lock it on this side. You absolutely could. I didn't, just so that if I needed to adjust it a little bit, I would have some room to adjust it. So I kind of slide the knots down the same, and again, you could also do 4 if you want here. I just found that the 3 bring it to the perfect location where I want it on my ankle, and I don't feel it or anything. Okay, so from here, I'm going to put my foot in. And then that goes all the way across to this hole up here by your little pinky toe. So Goes from the top to the bottom. Like from here, you're going to go underneath to this hole right here and go up through this hole. Then you're going to put it on. See if you got about the right measurement slack in the cord. So for me, this cord measurement's perfect because I have the shoe glue underneath here, so I know exactly where it should be. But I played with this, you know, how tight I wanted this. I can stick a finger underneath it. It's not super, super tight. At first, I would definitely get marks on my feet from it. From here, you go across to this upper toe hole by your big toe. So you go down through there. And I need to take it off to do the next hole. Then you flip it upside down, go up through the toe hole, okay, at this point, this is exactly where you can do either option, either tying method. So the tying method that I use the most that has this style, I'm going to show first. So this one, you got to have your sandal on. I have to be very careful with these cardboard ones because they tend to rip. And then what you're going to do is you're going to end up doing 2 slip knots. And you may not be able to see this closely enough, but if you go on YouTube, there's some examples of doing a slip knot. They're super easy. So it's going to fold back on itself. It's going to go make a loop all the way around. And then you go from the top through the hole and then pull it tight. I'm purposely not putting much of a tail on this one, this particular one right here. So then you pull it super tight. This knot slides. So the loop can get bigger like this and slide or slide up. What will happen is it will end up sliding up to meet the other knot. So you don't want a super huge loop. Then you're going to take this piece. This is your tail. And this piece is going to go through the hole. And here's where you tie another slip knot. Now at this point you're going to kind of cinch this knot back towards it because that's where it will end up anyway. So then from here you pull it as tight as you think you need it. Do a loop around. And then you have a hole like this. You go from the top through. And then try to keep you can't see this because my hand's in the way, but try to slide this knot closest to the top. So then you have 2 knots. I'm going to attempt to zoom in on this. With one hand it's hard. And have 2 knots that kind of lock against each other. You could do a variety of different knots here. So with these 2 slip knots locking against each other, you can actually use this method also for Kelly's method, where hers is different, but she ends up with a bow right here, and I didn't want a bow, so I did the 2 locking knots. But this is my favorite method. This is what I use the most. I did, as I've mentioned before, put shoe glue right here and here. Those are the only 2 spots that are showing. These didn't even really matter. They hardly ever get any wear. So from here I'm going to show you there's actually 2 variations. One really minor one that we came up with, and then one where it crosses over. So I'm going to show the really minor variation because you may find, you can see the angle of the cord. If for some reason it irritates you pulling this cord to this direction, you can actually take both of these cords and do the slip knots on this one. So I've done this with my little boy's shoes because at first he wasn't sure which he liked. Took him a little bit of getting used to. So you do a slip knot here, and that way this make it really tight. This cord is free to float wherever you want it. You know, it might move around on its own, but it's kind of more straight down. And then the same thing with this. Undo these, and then you just pick another spot. I tend to do this one on this outside and this on the inside. And then you do another slip knot. I've hiked in mine like this, super functional. I don't think it looks as nice because you have 2 knots kind of floating around, but it definitely works and your foot is very secure. So lastly, for the variation of the Chaco Z2, I think I accidentally called it the Z1 earlier. It's where it has the toe cross. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the tail and you're going to tie it just like my other alternate way of doing the previous one. Do a slip knot. So you're going to do it around to the top, pull it down tight so it cinches, locks right there. And then what this is going to do, I need to take my sandal off, it's going to go through this hole. So it goes through this hole, and then you tie a knot here. And as I mentioned, this knot is underneath your arch of your foot right here, so I never even notice it. And I played with whether to do a figure 8 knot or just a simple overhand knot, and I just did the overhand knot because the figure 8 knot ended up being kind of big. So I did an overhand knot, and I've worn my sandals like this quite a bit, and the knot's just fine. And I don't usually leave a big tail on it. I would cut it a little smaller. A thing to keep in mind is if you want to play with going between the two different styles is keep the cord long enough to do this style. This style takes a tiny bit more cord than the previous one, so I kind of always determined to cut my cord to have enough for this style. And then I've actually even been on a hike where if this was irritating me, I just take the knot out, pull it through, and then tie it the other way. So you can interchange between the two styles. So here are the final versions of each of them. Here's the one that's similar to the Chaco Z2 style. And then on the right foot is the connect pair with the style that I've been using the most, right here. So here's side view. So I've been using the classic pair for 3 months now, and I wear at least one of the pairs every single day for walking, hiking in the mountains, running a little bit. I'm not a huge runner, but I've been hiking over cobbles and technical high elevation terrain, and they're both absolutely wonderful. So I hope you've enjoyed these.